Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the JT Strong Arm Jack Stabilizer Kit for fifth wheel trailers with more than 58 inches between the landing gear. Now these are a great way to stabilize jacks because once you're at your campsite and everything's leveled out, you do have a fairly solid landing normally, but as you're walking around in the RV, sometimes you feel that side to side movement, and if you guys are having maybe a rowdy time, it is going to wobble side to side, and this is a great way to really minimize that because it creates a nice triangulation on your front jack arms. You also have the rear ones as well. So this is a total of 6 bars that's going to attach to a nice solid point on the frame, and they're going to be telescoping. So as you raise your jacks up, as long as you have your T-handles loosened up, they're going to draw up with it with no problem. Super easy setup. Once you drop it down, trailer's all leveled, you just go through, tighten down those T-handles, and you're good to go. Now once you're set up at your campsite and trailer's all level, that seems great and all, but as soon as the trailer starts rocking, whether from people walking around in it or just maybe having a good old time, you're going to see that the jacks are going to be moving side to side. And also twofold, when you're hooking up to your fifth wheel, a lot of times those jacks are going to want to flex. So to give them a little bit more stability is going to make it better for the occupants of the camper as well as the person that's loading the truck onto it. Now to simulate that, we have some help here. We're going to shake this around and really show the flex that we have on our jacks currently. Even with our auto stabilization down, one person on our fifth wheel, a kingpin just moving it side to side, is still plenty for the whole camper to move. So now let's give it a shake test. And it completely it just cuts all that shaking out. And the main thing that I see is that the jack is actually staying in its place instead of wobbling back and forth, which is a little bit scary, especially with weight on it. You can see there's slight side-to-side movement, but not like before. These do a really good job of just stabilizing everything out. So the great part about this is if you were to walk into your home and it was moving as you're walking around, you'd be concerned. So why not make your home away from home a little bit more solid and feel a little bit more secure while you have this at your campsite? Now, not only is it going to give you stability while you're camped, but also when you have these nice and tightened down, when you go to hook up your fifth wheel, also it's going to just kind of keep a little bit of that movement down to a minimum. Now, when you are ready to hit the road and ready to raise your jacks, just make sure that you twist this T-handle, and that's going to loosen this up. They do have a tool that you can pick up separately. That way, if you do have some of them that are a little bit harder to reach or you don't want to have to bend down to do that, you can still do that pretty easily. But it's just hand tightened, so pretty easy. You can just knock these loose, and I'll get this raised up. Now this kit doesn't require welding. There are some adapters that go onto certain jack feet that you can tack weld on, but that's not required. And this is going to bolt up. There will probably be some drilling required to make that happen, but it's going to work with a C-channel, an I-beam, or even an H-beam trailer frame. So really, it is kind of a universal kit as long as that landing gear is over that 58 inches. But it is going to kind of change up depending on your jack style. It does come with hardware that if you have holes in your jack to put a pin in, you can actually use that as a mounting point. We didn't really have that. Our jacks, we have the leveling jacks that are electric, which are really, really nice. And luckily our feet had holes already, so we picked up these additional brackets here to get our eyelets to be able to attach. But it really does come down to what you have on your trailer. Another thing that we did have to do is add an extra beam in the back to create a mounting point. It depends on your trailer as well, but that's something you're going to want to check as far as your jacks and the style that they're going to attach. Now, something else that I'll point out is the instructions are extremely wordy. It's very universal, so it kind of leads you, depending on what you're using, on how to install it. But overall, the installation's pretty easy once you do it. Don't let the instructions overwhelm you because it's not that difficult. So on the front, as I mentioned, you do have not only your front bars, but the side bars, and that's going to triangulate that jack, so it's not going to move side to side or front and back, and that's just going to eliminate it throughout the entire trailer. Now the back is pretty much just like this front one. It's just a cross like that. But again, all of that tightened down really does make a huge difference, and you're going to notice as soon as you're at a campsite walking around, and normally you'd feel that kind of side to side movement, or if wind gusts come through, this should really cut down a lot of that. You can take a look at a lot of the reviews of people that have installed this on their camper, and it seems to be across the board pretty rave. So hopefully we can get this installed by following along our instructions. Again, it is going to be kind of dependent on your trailer, but we'll give you a pretty good understanding on how to do that. And speaking of installation, comes with most of the hardware. As I said, we did have to pick up a few extra things, and I'll kind of speak to that as we get there. But really all you need is a 9/16 socket, 9/16 wrench. You will have to drill, as I mentioned before, but overall it's pretty simple as far as tools go, and really it's not that bad of an installation. Now the kit is going to come with the brackets that can attach to your jacks that have holes in them, and that's going to bolt up there. Ours does not have that option, so we did have to pick up these adapters. These are sold separately. They come in a quantity of 2, so you're going to need one for each foot pad that you're attaching it to. So in our case, we'll be picking up 3 of these to get our installation accomplished. Now, it does have a ridge here, so if you don't have holes in your foot pad, you can tack weld these onto these ridges to create a nice solid mounting point. But since ours has the holes already there, we're able to pass the hardware that's included. So if you need to, you can have your trailer hooked up to your vehicle, and that way you can raise these up to get these in place. You will, if you have snap pads, you will have to pop those off. Now your other option too, if you don't have the holes, you can drill that out. It's about a 3/8 drill bit to accomplish that, enough to where you can pass your hardware through. So that way, if you don't have access to a welder, you still have options, and you can kind of see roughly where the holes are factory drilled. So if you want to use this as a reference, it's about midway between this portion and the outside. So somewhere in this area should get you in the right spot. So before I get these in place, I am going to put a little bit of thread lock on the hardware, just that way we know for sure that it's going to really hold in place for the lifespan of these. And these are going to go perpendicular to one another, so we'll go ahead and start getting this tension down. We want this nice and even, exactly where we want it, to where it's straight shooting down the frame. So I'm going to use my screwdriver here and just try to make sure that this is lined up exactly where we want it. Now obviously the foot pad moves, so we are going to want to get these designated spots where we have our side mounting as well as the ones that go across. So it's a large Phillips. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of zip this up real quick. I'll go ahead and get my other one in place as well. You're going to have a total of 2 on each foot in the front, and then 1 on each in the back. So again, order as many as your RV requires, but in our case, since we are doing the front and back, we did need 3 of them. So with that hardware tightened down, we can go ahead and get our snap pad put back on. These attachment points made, we do need to put the hardware to attach our arms, because obviously this is a little bit thicker than what attaches to the arm. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting mine up to where it's set a little bit closer to the frame, and on our strong arms that are going to go along the side of our chassis, I put the tab on this end, and that way it's closer to the frame. Try to get it as in straight line as possible. So what we'll do is we'll put a flat washer on, and then we're going to finish it up with a flat washer and a nylon lock nut. Now we're tightening this down enough to get it snug, but this obviously still has to pivot. So the main thing is we still have a little bit of movement, but we have it nice and snug. So we'll go ahead, and what I'm going to do is put a screwdriver, just kind of hold that in with a 9/16 socket. I'll just go ahead and get this tightened down. And that might be a little tight, as it is kind of hard to move, so I'll just back this off a hair. I think that should be good. That nylon lock nut's going to really hold this in place, but we still have mobility, and side to side we're good. So go ahead and get all of them tightened down. Now the instruction manual lays out a bunch of different applications as far as width, and that's really what determines how you're going to mount this up. And ours being a fairly wide distance, and also having this underbody tray being metal and the frame type that we have, we determined that we're going to be mounting up our eyelets through this. We're going to be drilling through, and this is going to become our mounting point. Now we need to be about 1/4 of an inch back from the outside of the frame here, and I've measured to find my middle point, and I've put a mark here. So what we'll do is with the paint marker just mark out where we're going to be drilling for this. With our marks made, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to use a pilot hole, so a little bit smaller of a drill bit. Eventually we're going to be coming back with a 3/8 drill bit, as that's going to be large enough to pass our bolts through. But we'll go ahead and get this drilled out first. Now obviously I'm going to state this, but before drilling, make sure everything in your panel up top or your storage compartment there is nice and clear. That way you're not drilling into it. So now we're going to come back with our 3/8 drill bit and enlarge these holes. Our customer today had some wood board here to put on their flooring, so we did have to notch that out, and that way we have enough thread for this to pass through and get tightened down. But make sure that you have both brackets. We're going to have one on the bottom of the frame and obviously one on the top, and that way it's sandwiched in there. I'm also going to go ahead and put a flat washer. We'll pass this up through the hole and then through that middle bracket we have there, and then I'll finish it up with a flat washer and one of our nylon lock nuts. And same thing as before, we're going to kind of tighten this down, but we want to make sure that we have enough wiggle room here to where this can still kind of move a little bit. It's going to help us get our arms in place. And so with your 9/16 socket, go ahead and tighten these down. Now to get the hardware attached to our arm on our foot pad, just because of this bracket here, I'm going to actually take this off, and that way we can get our hardware with the head kind of down here to give us that clearance. Now something I'll point out, because we used this kit with this style of foot plate, you are going to need to pick up a few more eyelets because these are going to be your mounting points for the rest of them. So you know, basically we ordered 6 more for the whole entire trailer because we utilized these for our mounting pads. Now I'll go ahead and get this attached, and there is a specific way on our arm. You can see there's this thinner telescoping spot that's closer to the handle. You're going to want that to where gravity allows water to not go in it, because if we had it the other way, water's just going to trickle in here and build. So make sure you have it set up properly. If you had the standard drop legs, you wouldn't need to pick up these extra, but with our situation here, we did. So again, I'm going to get this kind of bolted into place first. And then again, we're just going to tighten this down. Pretty much all the hardware, these nylon lock nuts, once you kind of have it in place, they're not going to walk out. You want it to obviously be able to move, but make sure there's no slop in it. So firm, but still movable. Now when we bolt this up to our center section, make sure that that T-handle is faced up, and also you want to check to make sure that you have your sticker kind of facing out, if that's the look you're going for. So it's nice to have these just a little bit loose so we can get that perfect pitch here. And so it's pretty tight here. It's a good thing we did a 1/4 inch gap, because that allows us to get our hardware in place. And it's going to be the same as all the others, but I am going to have to feed this through and then hold that nut in place as we tighten it down. Make sure you have a flat washer on both sides. And then we'll tighten this down. So now at this point we have one of our arms installed. We'll go ahead and repeat the other step, or the same exact steps, to get the other side done, and then we'll start working on our side ones. Now after kind of checking clearances, I did realize that our bracket that we have for our side strong arms, we're going to actually rotate this, and that way we have this on the outside, and that way we have clearance when we draw our jack back up. So this is a good time. We'll take it off, and we'll also get our hardware started on this, just like it was for this one. It's a little bit tricky to get that hardware in place. And we'll be using this bracket to attach this to the frame. So we'll go ahead and get this attached. Again, flat washer, and then finish this up once you pass it through the flat washer and that nylon lock nut. And I'm going to go ahead and get this assembled now before we mount this up. And we're not going to attach our arms because we're going to be using this to mark and drill out the frame, and then we'll be passing our hardware through there. So first I'll go ahead and get this tightened down. And the best way to do this, you can just put a 9/16 wrench here, and then grab your screwdriver and just twist this. We're going to measure from our jack, the back side of it. We're going 27 3/4, so go ahead and measure that out and mark that on the frame rail. And that's going to be where we have the front part of our bracket. It's going to kind of sit here. So if you have any of the underbody paneling, you're going to want to trim that out. We're going to have this pretty well flush against the outside. The reason I chose to do that is because this is still pretty sturdy, as it's about a 1/4 inch in, but we had a gas line running along here. So for clearance sake on the other side, that's what I did. And we're just going to kind of keep this uniform. So right about here is where it's going to mount. So just as the same as we did with our center mounting bracket, we're going to go ahead and mark these out, and then I'm going to drill it out with a small pilot hole, and then come back with that 3/8 drill bit. And our hardware is going to be the exact same too. So with that nylon lock nut, just make sure you have the burrs knocked down. That way everything seats nice and tight. Now with those holes drilled out, we'll go ahead and get our hardware tightened down. Attach our arm to our new eyelet. Same thing, flat washer on each side, and then our nylon lock nut. Now at this point, you can go ahead and repeat on the other side, but I do recommend raising up your jack if you have it supported, and that way you can see if there's any clearance issues before installing the other. Now we've gone ahead and we've installed our rear arms as well. Now it's going to install just about the same as the front, and we mounted it up about the same. Now the downside is we didn't find a really great spot to mount up our center hardware, so we ended up actually cutting a beam and making it fit. We did self-tap it in. We used the screws that came in the kit to self-tap it up, and the main thing is creating a nice center mounting point. Now this is kind of up to you, and it kind of depends on your application. The bars don't have to be perfectly straight, but you need to make sure you have something that's obviously pretty strong to be able to hold that center support. So you can see we mounted that up just like the front, as I mentioned, and this is what we added in. It just runs across, and it's pretty well centered up with the jacks. So the hardware is going to be identical to how we did it in the front. And then on our arms here, we use those adapters as well, and I just have these pointing straight out. So at this point, we have them all installed. Now we want to make sure that we have all of our jacks placed down, our snap pads put back in place, and we're going to go ahead, and once the trailer is pretty level or where we'd be at a campsite, go ahead and those T-handle nuts, just tighten those down by hand. And that was a look and installation of the JT Strong Arm Jack Stabilizer Kit for fifth wheel trailers with more than 58 inches between landing gear.